Yeah, it was a great experience to run for president. Wish I could do it again. Probably not going to ever happen, but it was a once in a lifetime, really educational experience to go across the country, meet people, learn the issues. People tell you their stories in a way that, of course, in the military, we never heard that. I taught economics, and I was in the Office of Management and Budget for a year as White House fellow. And I thought, I knew something about the country, but I didn't. So I've had a great education through politics. And that's why I'm so happy to be on your program. I know you all are trying to generate change, and you're trying to do it at the grassroots level. And that's the only way it works. I mean, if you just a military analogy, if you will. Sure. So the difference in the fighting in Ukraine today that you're seeing is the difference between a democratically inspired army and an army of a dictator. The Ukrainians were trained in the American system. They know that individual soldiers make the difference in war. The Russians think that it's all about artillery and just push the troops out there and they're just cannon fodder. But here's the thing. I think politics is the same thing. Yeah. I think a country's only as good as its voters, as the people that make up the country. You'll always have some stars, some big names, some big egos who are out there running for office. Nothing against people that run for office. Somebody has to do it. But it's really the people themselves who select, who monitor, who govern the atmosphere. And that's what I've been so worried about, is the country's become so divided and partisan and so ugly. People have talked so ugly to each other. So that's what we're trying to work on. So I'm very happy to be with you today.
I think a certain reason people have gotten so much worse and so much, I think, uglier towards each other is because of the social media and the online and all of this stuff. Because I think people feel at liberty to say things online that they wouldn't obviously say to your face. I think people can hide behind screens, and it's so much easier to brew this discord and this division. It's so easy to sort of set that on like a wildfire and just people encamp themselves in their little tribes.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think also, of course, the social media engines drive the separation. But the other thing I was taught in politics is that there's three things you got to do to win a political campaign. This is what I was told by a friend of mine named Chet Edwards, who was a longtime Democratic congressman from the Fort Hood area of Texas. And Chet said you have to define yourself, you have to define your opponent, and you have to respond quickly to any attacks on you. And so if you think about that, this is the essence of politics, is to show difference that distinguishes you. You're trying to win the vote. What makes you different? Why are you worthy of the support? And so this is part of what contributes to the divisiveness in American politics today. And the fact is that the social media just amplifies it.
Yeah.
We're speaking with General Wesley Clark. What inspired you to run for president? Because you could have been a modern day Eisenhower, who I do think is one of our probably 6 or 7 best commander-in-chiefs that we ever had. But obviously, it really, I don't think people really understand the amount of work and the amount of trials and tribulations that go into doing something so significant as running for president. But what did inspire you to ultimately make that leap? Because it is very rare for somebody of your stature to go forward and try it. And the ones who have been pretty successful.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why I did it. Because first, I was concerned that we were being taken into a war that we shouldn't have entered into, that wouldn't end well, that we didn't have to fight. And that was the Iraq War. And from the time I wrote my first op-ed, I was a CNN commentator, but I was asked by the Times of London to write it. My wife said, please don't write this. She said, you're going to get into this. And what I was against it, because there was no reason to use military force against Iraq. And as events unfolded, of course, that's true. And then we didn't do it well when we did it. We went in with not enough troops. We didn't have a game plan. We didn't understand what we were doing. So it was a blunder, and it's destabilized the whole Middle East. Afghanistan wasn't much better. It looked better at the outset, but we still didn't know what to do once we had it, and we never committed the resources to it. And really, Afghanistan isn't a country anyway. It's a bunch of tribes inside a geographic boundary. We never could quite get our heads on that. So I was inspired by the trying to prevent a failure for the country on the one hand. But on the other hand, I've been in the White House as a White House fellow. I supported Ronald Reagan twice, maybe because he was patriotic, maybe because I didn't know any better, maybe because I didn't understand the consequences of what sounded like reasonable ideas if they were played out over 30 years. But that's what happens in democracies. People cast votes and then sometimes they don't like the consequences. But I saw a vision for America that we could really take the country forward, that we could take it forward in a way of building respect for each other, of strengthening the country at the cutting edge, which is the individual person. I just don't believe people should go bankrupt because of medical emergencies. I believe that when you graduate from high school and whether you go into college or whatever you're going to do, that can't be your last educational experience. And I think we have to do more to bring the country forward, to build a workforce, a working workforce in America that's growing and learning. This is what we did in the United States Army. We created something we call discovery learning through our combat training centers. So they'd run an operation, 500 guys, sometimes a couple of thousand. They'd run the operation, then they'd break down and say, what happened? Why did it happen? And how can we do better? And eventually we broke through this crust of leaders saying, well, I'm a really great leader. I'm sure I didn't make a mistake. Must have been your fault. And we got people to confess and be honest and open and candid. And it really built the system of the Army that endured with a lot of pressure on it through the whole Iraq and Afghanistan campaigns. It's a much different Army than it was in the 1960s and 70s. We built that Army, and I'm convinced that in America, we can recreate this culture in a way that people respect each other more, that we understand that it's a lifetime experience in America. You don't just sort of go to school and say, well, I don't think this algebra means anything, so I'm not going to study it. And, I just want to be in the band and have a party. Okay, you can have a good time in America, but everybody's got a duty to the country in some respect. You need to provide service to others. And really, this is the whole meaning of life. If you think about where we are in the country right now, if you think about where we are in the world, we're going to have I think we just hit 8 billion people officially in the world. But if you look at all the wealth of the world today, if you could stop Vladimir Putin from killing people in Ukraine and have Xi Jinping relax a little bit in China and guide it forward, there's enough wealth today in the world and enough technology that every single human being in Africa, South Asia, Latin America, and the United States, North America, could have a home, family, employment, clothing, education, all the things that people aspire to. Now, the question is then, how do we do that? How do we bring that respect for each other forward? We always say diversity is our greatest strength, but the politics divides us. And Xi Jinping, of course, apparently told Biden, he said, democracies don't work. The future belongs to strong leaders. Well, I don't think he's right. But, right now we're in this contest between autocracies and democracies. You're just seeing it play out militarily in Ukraine, but the real action is behind the scenes in Germany, France, Italy, and in the United States and Britain, which is, can governments, if every government chipped in just a bit to the Ukrainians, Russia would have no chance. But Russia can, hurt the living standards, raise the cost of living. I mean, Vladimir Putin must look at today's economic news and cheer. Said, oh, boy, Biden, thinks he's so tough with these American missiles coming. Well, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to work and make the price of oil double again, and he'll be voted out of office. And so, there's a personal dimension to all this conflict. We have to have the American people understanding where we are, what we have to do to move forward in the 21st century. So that's, I see you all doing that, and that's really close to my heart. I think it's all about the people. It's not about the institutions, really. It's about the culture. It's about people's willingness to serve and sacrifice and help each other and respect each other. That's really what it's about.